Everyday Orthodox. I'm your host, Elisa Bielatich-Davis, and we get together here on Sunday nights to meet everyday Orthodox Christians. We're just building up church unity one person at a time. And tonight, I'm very excited to introduce you to Matthew Robb Brown. He's a poet, and that alone honestly makes me excited to talk to him because I always enjoy spending some time with poets. But, and of course, you know, the saints say that you have to be a poet if you want to be a Christian. So let's listen. Let's listen. This is all prerequisite to being Orthodox, my friends. But, you know, in fact, we've had Cyril Jenkins on the show before, and he is a very accomplished man. And one of his accomplishments is Basilian Media. Basilian like basil. It almost sounded like Brazilian the way I just said it, but Basilian Media and Publishing. And he actually just published Matthew Robb Brown's latest book, which is called Still Points. And he's also, you know, been published in Rule of Faith. He's had work in Image, Tar River Poetry, the Merton Journal. He's published other books. And so it's very possible as we start talking, you may recognize some of the stuff that we're talking about. But he and his wife converted from Orthodoxy. And I'm going to let him tell you the story. So we'll start there. So welcome to the program, Matthew.
Well, thank you very much, Elisa.
Well, it's good to have you on the show. I'm excited. I'm very excited to get to know you. Yeah. And so tell me, where did your story start? Where were you born and what were you born into?
Okay, what was I born into? that's you know, if Jesus had asked me before sending me to earth, you know, do you want to be born into all this? I don't know what I would have said.
Right. It's probably best that we don't have a choice.
We don't have that. We don't have that. We're not asked permission. You know, God,
no, we never are.
God does the best thing for all of us.
That's right.
That's something that makes me very happy. So I was born in Midland, Michigan, which is only a few miles from Saginaw, Michigan, where a very famous poet came from named Theodore Retke. And I grew up in the American Baptist Church, and what I would find out when I would go to Baptist camp is just how liberal my church was compared to the other American Baptist churches back in the 60s. This was, and you know, because they would be more like what I think of as a fundamentalist kind of church. And although I think they preached pretty much as much of the Protestant gospel, you know, they preached it more faithfully than is found maybe in a lot of places now. But
thank God.
It's just, thank God. But and the thing that gave me my biggest background for the sake of orthodoxy was how much scripture was in the sermons and some of the hymns. We even had a version of Holy, Holy, Holy that we sang. And even a poem called the Ballad of Trees and the Master. I don't know if I'd be able to think of the author of that, but
neat.
And even our old hymn book, believe it or not, contained a song called "Morning Is Broken," which became a top 40 hit by Cat Stevens in 1972.
I was going to say, why does that sound familiar? Oh, that's why.
Yeah. It was written by one of those a lady who wrote it back in the 19th century, late 19th century.
Wow!
And she he picked that song up.
Those old hymns are beautiful, though. You can see why it would happen because they're just really a lot of them are really thought-provoking and lovely. But that's funny. So you're in Michigan as a kid,
so
50s and 60s. What were you like?
Yeah. I was born in 52. I was
okay.
Well, I might as well just say this: I'm on the autistic spectrum, and this was not realized for a long time. And they tried a lot of different things with me, so that's one aspect. And another thing is being raised in the American Baptist Church. Probably. The first thing that would have pointed me toward orthodoxy was when I was in college and I was at Saginaw Valley State University, which, again, my sophomore year there was only the 10th anniversary of the institution itself. So it was a brand new college being built in old farm fields. And I had a humanities class called Saints and Symbols. And we actually read Lives of the Saints at one point. There was a Penguin book that has the lives of 3 Celtic saints, pre-schism Celtic saints. Cuthbert is one of them. And one of the things we did, though, was we went over to an Orthodox church, the only Orthodox church in the Saginaw Valley, St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church. And we went over there and had a tour of the church and looked at the icons and all this kind of thing. And the guy who told the story or talked about it was not an Orthodox Christian, so he really didn't know what he was talking about. He called the halos on the icons auras and things like that. So I went away thinking, well, what does this have to do with orthodoxy? And I think God took that as a challenge. What does this have to do with Christianity is what I was going to say.
Right. But, yeah, well, it's so different, right? Even walking into the church, it would look so different from a Baptist church and anything you had ever seen. And then to not, it's interesting, like if you don't have the right person expressing what it is, it can be really actually a turnoff, right? Like the first time I ever walked into a church, the first thing I ever heard in an Orthodox church, I was 15 years old, and they're like, well, you need to cover your heads, and you're a woman, so don't you walk anywhere near here, and don't do this, and do that. And it was just like, there was no love. There was no, like, this is a holy place. It was just, people don't realize, well, I mean, I guess they're not Orthodox, so they don't know. So, but it's a shame not to have a tour from the priest. That might have been a little more intriguing.
Yeah. Well, we did eventually get a tour from the priest. That turned out to be our first parish, because that was, if you live in the Saginaw Valley, I think to this day, that's your choice. If you want to be in an Orthodox church, and it's centrally located between Midland, where I was born, Bay City, where my wife and I raised our children, and Saginaw, where I worked some of the time throughout.
There you go. That's a great area. And, I like that. That's neat.
It's quite beautiful. I mean, there's some. It's a little bit flat, but.
That's all right. I'm in Texas. We don't have a problem with flat. I don't know. What are you saying? You saying a place can't be flat? But no. Okay. So as you're growing up, were you like poetic already? Would you say that you? I would say I always was. Yeah. I once had a numinous experience with a cottonwood tree. Thinking of it in connection with God somehow. I can't tell you how exactly, but. Oh, that's beautiful. But,
as a very young child. The other interesting thing is my wife, growing up in Dearborn, Michigan, her parents didn't go to a church, but they allowed her to go to a Presbyterian church. And so she was in Sunday school, and she was learning all the doctrine of the Presbyterian church, which is...
like predestination and like so it's different, right? Yeah, it's so different.
It's different. It's different from what I got, and it's different from Orthodoxy. But early on, when she was in Sunday school, she got she had the question come to her mind: why did the Eastern Church not have a Reformation? And
wow.
I've always been very fascinated that at such a young age she thought that, because I didn't even know there was an Orthodox church.
I was going to say, how did she?
And I'm 5 years older than her, but
wow, yeah. Where was she learning enough to even realize that? I feel like the way that people teach it. Yeah, I feel like the way that history classes go, it's like, well, there was one church, it split into two, and those Eastern guys, they just died off. The Ottomans came in, they were finished, and then they just move on. But of course, it didn't at all. But we get told that sometimes.
Tend to hear is that they had house churches where they sat around and played guitar and sang hymns, and then everything fell and got all institutionalized and all liturgized and all these different things, So
all those hippie
so there was this big gap between that time and Luther. And Luther rides in like a knight and restores the church to what it should be.
Right. So, that's pretty much how I learned it.
That's kind of the history.
That's what I learned. Constantine came along and ruined Christianity, and then years later it was saved. It's an interesting. It's, as an Orthodox Christian, it seems so obvious to say, like, why would God abandon His church for so long? But when you're raised with it, it has a logic to it, and you just go with it. But I'm curious. You mentioned that you're on the autistic spectrum, and that was really not identified at all at the time when you were growing up, right? People didn't understand what that was. And so different folks had different ideas about how to raise kids on the spectrum. What were you experiencing, and how did it impact you?
Well, my parents took me to a doctor in Detroit, Michigan, who prescribed, it was called occupational therapy, but it really was different from what occupational therapy is today. And it had me, the theory behind it all was that I was not given my mother kept me in a playpen, which is true, she did. She even kept me chained up in the backyard so that I wouldn't walk away, because I would walk away from the house and go blocks and blocks away.
Right.
And she didn't want me to do that. So,
yeah. But to be fair, I think all kids until like the mid 80s were stuck in playpens for most of their, early childhood. That wasn't so unusual.
But the theory back then in the 60s was that if you didn't get enough crawling and you didn't have that tactile feel of the carpet or whatever on your hands and stuff, that it affected your development. So, that's long gone now, but
well,
that was what they said.
It crops up. You'd be surprised, but we won't get into it too much. But I have a cousin I could tell you about. But
oh yeah.
It's that's still around somewhat, right? That there's this old idea of how the brain develops, and these ideas that, like, for good vision you have to crawl, and for tactile, and otherwise you'll be real picky about textures and things. But that's really not what that is.
Well, people on the spectrum can have tactile sensitivities, and so maybe that's why they think that or something.
I guess.
But anyway, I had this therapy. I had to fill out math sheets, and I was always terrible at math, and crawl around the floor. I had to do a certain amount of crawling every day when I was like in 7th grade, 8th grade.
That must have been really annoying.
It kind of was. And it wasn't because my parents didn't love me. They were doing everything they could for me,
Yeah. They wanted to make sure you had a good life. And they probably felt a lot of guilt that, your mom, I messed him up. He didn't crawl enough, and now we got to fix it. And,
I know. It's really terrible. I mean, I had to sit there and listen to this doctor tell my mother how bad a mother she was. And
that's awful. That's awful. And I can say,
it's funny now, but it wasn't funny then.
I think it's a lot easier to take, I'm sure, once you know what the spectrum is, and once all of these things fall into place, and it's like, oh, okay, nobody's doing anything wrong, nothing terrible is happening. But at the time, it must have been, I don't know, it's hard. I feel like middle school is hard enough, right? 7th and 8th grade are tough years.
That was the worst for me.
Yeah, it's hard to feel like, oh, there's something wrong with me, and I got to do this therapy to fix it, and knowing that it's really not changing anything or fixing anything. Or were you still a pretty happy kid, or was this like, did this preoccupy you much? Did it bother you much?
It bothered me, and I was plagued by bad dreams as a child. Various objects. I won't go into detail about it because it wouldn't make any sense to anybody else, but various objects would come after me in my dreams. And I think there are some Disney films that had something to do with that. Dumbo, for one.
That's funny, actually. I have a friend who grew up at the same time and would have seen the same, and she was always just like, I hate Disney films. They were the worst. Like, they were just...
Well, they're all about trauma. The parents or the mother gets, like Bambi, the mother gets killed right away. And
Yep. Yeah, they were. They had a whole different idea of what was good for kids back then.
Not family, and the Wizard of Oz had its aspects too. I was a little older when I saw that, so it didn't affect me quite as much. But
yeah, Yeah, it's
But
true.
those are
And there also,
traumatic
even you think of
films.
fairy tales and stuff, like there were a lot of stories that maybe weren't even intended for kids. And then they make children's films out of it when they first have the ability to make films. And it's, I think they should have thought that through a little bit more because some of the films they made were really not good for children at all. But so as you're growing up then, you're kind of poetic, you're on the spectrum. Were you pretty happy in school, or did you run into struggles? Like, how'd you do with the other kids?
I pretty much struggled in school. I was bullied a lot and bad at math. Okay, I mean the things I started to excel at were writing stories and things like that, you know. And I
Yeah.
wrote a poem in second grade. That would be the first poem, and I don't have a copy of it anymore. But
do you remember anything about it? You think, was it a good poem? We all got to start somewhere.
You all got to start somewhere, yeah.
That's great. Well, so okay, so as you're growing up, then it seems like you were spending a lot of time like writing, and so maybe you were sort of more of a quiet person, but you had summer camp as well. But the summer camp must have been strange if it felt like the other kids were getting a whole different brand of like what they thought was Baptist and what you thought was Baptist were different. That can be isolating too, right?
It was kind of interesting because my some of the camp counselors there were from my church, and they would have us sing spirituals around the campfire, which was really cool. They would also have us sing Peter, Paul, and Mary songs like "Blowing in the Wind" and
yes, anti-war songs.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there were. I don't know. We sang them in school too. I mean, I don't think that they were considered too subversive, but they weren't fundamentalist for sure.
They weren't fundamental. It's just that some of the kids I knew that I met at camp had a more conservative attitude towards things than I did. And later on, like when I was a teenager, I got into the hippie movement, and then I went from there to the Jesus movement, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
well, tell me about that. So when did you get involved in the hippie? Well, also I have one other question real quick though before we leave it. Did you feel like, oh, if these other kids are kind of more fundamentalist, maybe what I have is different from other, like maybe I'm not as Baptist as I think, or did that concern you, or were you just like, I like my church, I'm glad I am where I am?
I was more like, I like my church. And many of the friends I did have were from the church too, so that was nice.
That's good. That's very good. So okay, so then so you're in college. Is that when you got involved in the hippie movement, or was that later?
I got involved in the hippie movement when I was still in junior high school.
Oh, wow.
I started drawing. I started listening to the Jefferson Airplane and drawing psychedelic posters because you couldn't buy anything like that in Midland, Michigan. And I took old political buttons and made them into peace buttons and things like that.
Oh, I just
made my own. I made my own hippie movement in Midland, Michigan.
I love that.
Not that nobody else did. I mean, there were a lot of the kids in my class were in bands, and a good number of them still are to this day in bands.
Oh, wow. That's really neat. That's very cool.
In rock and roll bands and stuff. So
you were drawn to the music and the art and the movement in general. Do you think that impacts your poetry at all? Do you think it, like, were you thinking a lot about the lyrics and the flow of the lyrics and the...
Well, see, this was the time when Paul Simon and Bob Dylan and the Doors and all these different people were coming along. And so that was really where I started out in receiving poetry, was from rock music, quite frankly.
Sure.
And,
the lyrics were very poetic, especially at that time. I mean, they always are usually, but in particular there, they often will say, like, Dylan's the great poet of our times, right?
Well, I say sometimes to people, he was my Shakespeare. And he did write a lot of gospel songs and things like that, too, along the way. He recorded a number of gospel and blues songs on his first album. There were only 2 songs on it that were written by him.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
The rest of the songs on it were all traditional songs, including gospel songs.
That's
And
neat.
so,
That's really neat.
and later on, he got involved he did the Slow Train album and those kinds of things where the songs were all about Christ. And so,
Have you ever encountered Metropolitan Sabas of Pittsburgh and had a conversation with him about Bob Dylan? He is
no, I
such
haven't.
a tremendous Dylan fan, and it's so beautiful to hear him kind of reconcile, Orthodox thought and Dylan, and it's lovely if you ever get a chance. It's really
I
a
don't know
great
if you've heard the
conversation.
song "You've Got to Serve Somebody." That was from his later gospel period. It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody.
That's
And
right.
that song actually won a Grammy Award.
See, look at him bringing Christian thought into the light. That's amazing. And it's interesting, though, because nobody really thinks of Dylan as a Christian musician in any way, right? I don't think,
Well,
if you know about him, you did. Oh, yeah? There you go. See, my parents were always like, oh, that hippie Bob Dylan, stay away from that guy. But
well, so were my parents.
Yeah.
My parents thought the Beatles were going to bring about the apocalypse.
Yeah. I think there were a lot of people at the time who were
when I got
scared.
into Sgt. Pepper and everything, that,
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because all that music sounds so innocent now, after all these years. But I don't know, maybe they did usher something in, maybe they didn't. It's hard to say. But yeah, okay. Well, that's very cool. All right, so you're kind of a hippie influenced kid in a land without adult hippies. You don't have hippie guides, but you have other kids, huh?
Yeah, other kids. I wrote poems that were published in the high school's underground newspaper. Nice. We had an underground newspaper actually, and things like that.
That's really cool. That's very cool.
Around 1968, I started writing poems, and they'd be poems that sometimes would be about Jesus Christ, but they were in the style of the Doors or something.
That's kind of cool, actually. That's really neat. That's really neat. Okay,
well, they weren't the greatest poems, but
no. Well, we sometimes we have to grow and mature. Poet has to suffer.
Oh, yeah,
Poet's gotta.
You do.
You do. You have to work your way through and start at the beginning. But
I don't regret anything that I suffered, in school or anything else, because God used it in all kinds of ways to cause me to be dependent on Him and to I don't know, just not believe everything, not believe what the world is selling, about how you can do anything you want to and da-da-da-da-da,
Yeah. I mean, that's really the antidote to receiving grace, isn't it? You just, there's such a joy in realizing that you're dependent on God and all of a sudden finding out that there are all these riches start flowing to you. And it's, thank God, it's a wonderful thing. But yeah, it's really the exact opposite of the gospel of the world around us. But, so tell me, what did you do? You went to college. Did you really leave for college or did you live at home and just commute to college?
No, I lived at home and commuted to college, because it was only a few miles away anyhow.
Yeah, it's right nearby. What did you study?
I studied English and history. English was my major.
Nice. And, very nice.
And I published poems in the literary magazine. Actually, I won second place in a poetry contest that college sponsored, Saginaw Valley,
nice.
for high school students, and I won second place in that when I was a sophomore in high school. So
that's cool. That's really neat.
Published in their literary magazine, the first one that they started out with. It went by a different name once I was actually in college.
Yeah,
but.
Did that make you feel like they were your people? Like that's a good place for you to go to school because they appreciate you. They get you.
Well, the thing is, once I got into high school, the bullying pretty much stopped because I found my own clique, if you will, all the artists and poets and
that's great.
Those people. So I just, it was a big enough school that you didn't have to interact with all those characters anymore. So.
That's great. That can be a real blessing, right? A bigger high school and just sort of room to find all these little pockets and these little corners of people who are welcoming and happy to have you. And thank God, that's very good.
The attitude I take about all this, whatever I may have suffered, whether, however it compares to what anybody else may have suffered. It's all good because it all makes you more open to God. At least in retrospective, you can say that.
I think so. Why do you think what do you think is the mechanism? Why is it that suffering opens us up to God?
Well, I think it makes us realize that what the world offers is not. I mean, if you do well in the world, it's harder to come to God, actually, I think, from the way it appears to me anyway. It's actually harder to approach God if you think that you've got it all together. And, I don't know how people go through life and never think about the fact that one day they're going to have to die and what happens then, for instance. And if you suffer things, you go through things, you're more open to understanding those things when they come along.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's a good point, right? Like if you're doing well in the world and you just sort of feel like you've got this all under control, why do you need God at all, right? You don't need him. You don't need to rely on him. I think sometimes I'll talk with parents about that a little bit, where it's like, well, maybe don't worry about your kids so much because they sort of need to suffer or else they're going to be awful. Like we all need to suffer a little bit to be humble so that we can realize that maybe it'd be a good thing if there was a good God willing to take us in and take care of us. But if you don't want that, then you're never gonna look for it. You never answer the door. But we're going to take a very short break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to hear all about. We are, right? Does this not fly by? I always tell people this show. I'll tell you, these conversations they go real fast. But we'll be right back, and I'm going to want to hear about how you met your wife, because I always love those stories, So we'll be right back with Matthew Robb Brown.
Okay.
Year after Pascha, the Orthodox Church celebrates the holy myrrh bearers, who cared for Jesus' body after he was crucified. But myrrh bearing has a broader definition. It can serve as a metaphor for the practical, incarnate love to which Christ calls his followers. In The Art of Myrrh Bearing, author Elisa Bielatich Davis explores the lives of grace-filled, myrrh-bearing saints in Scripture and throughout the life of the Church, offering questions for reflection in each chapter. By following the lead of compassionate saints, such as Joseph of Arimathea and Olga of Alaska, we can learn to embrace a simple and profound way of life in ever-deepening communion with Christ and with others. You can find this book at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
Welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We're here to build community the old-fashioned way through conversation. So if you stick around long enough, you should meet people from every jurisdiction, every walk of life, every corner of this continent. And thanks very much to those very helpful producers that we have. Mike and Simon are in the Chesterton. Gosh, guys, I can't speak right now. They're in the Chesterton studios producing the show tonight, and they're here every time we're live on Sunday nights. And so thank you to Mike and Simon. And of course, if you ever miss a show, you'll find us in the archives on the Ancient Faith website or on YouTube. And of course, tonight we're talking to Matthew Robb Brown. And I want to hear a little bit. I want to hear some of his poetry tonight, I'm hoping. But first, we got to introduce your wife into this story, right? Because there's another very important person that comes into this story. Kay, tell me, how did you end up meeting her? How does all that go?
She is a very important person. We've been together now for 43 years, or been married for that long.
Glory to God.
2 years before that. And well, the way we met was as I got a little bit older, I started trying out different churches, and I got involved in the charismatic movement. I'll try to make this short. And eventually, she got into that too. And we were in something that was called the shepherding movement, which was really a heresy. And have you heard of that before?
I have, yeah. I sure have.
I was in a church in Bay City, Michigan. I had left my parents' house by that time, and I went to live actually in the basement of the pastor, and he helped me get a job. And my wife she was going to school at Mount Pleasant at Central Michigan University, and she got involved in another group that was there, and they had a whole apartment house, and their church was in the basement of that. And so, but we got to know each other through things like canoe trips and square dances. She's a musician. She did play the violin. She's our choir director now in our church, but she would play the fiddle at square dances and things like that. And we really got to know each other a little bit better on a canoe trip. And so we got together, and make a long story as short as I can.
Well, you don't have to make it too short. That's all right.
we eventually came to the conclusion that this thing was bogus. And the thing that made me realize it was bogus was that I went to a meeting at our church one night, and some of the leaders I think some from her group and some from other groups, talked about how you have to train your wife like a horse and things like that, and
Yep.
And
it's a bad sign. It's a very bad sign when you start hearing somebody talk like that.
Heard that. When I started hearing that and heard some other disparaging comments they made about other people, and they didn't realize that I knew who the other people were and things like that, I came to realize that this was not a good thing. And but actually, I'll go back a little bit, because when I first got involved in it, it was through a friend of mine who, well, I won't say anything too much more about him, but it was through a friend of mine, and he, well, let's see. When I got involved in the church, I heard various things that well, one of the things, the pastor's father came and taught one time that there's certain things God doesn't know until you tell him, and certain things he can't do until you let him do it. And this is being taught today in the charismatic movement a lot. And I just realized that was a sheer heresy. And even as not having been Orthodox or anything before.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true. There are certain teachings that are just so at odds, right? Like sometimes something's just a little bit off, and you take it in, but then every once in a while something comes up and it's so much at odds with what the gospel says, that it's just like, that can't be it. Or like you said, making disparaging comments and just behaving in an unchristian way, you feel it and it hits you wrong. But yeah, the idea that God can't do things without our permission, I mean, he may choose not to do something without your activity, but there's nothing he can't do, right?
Right, yeah. And Kay and I just got closer together. We simply became friends for 2 years. And at the end of that time, it was at her parents had a cottage, which they later built their permanent home there. And we went up on a hilltop and talked for a while, and we decided we wanted to get married. And it wasn't like I got down on my knee and proposed or anything like that. We were just sitting on a log and enjoying watching the hawks fly around through the sky, and we just came to that.
That's beautiful.
Conclusion.
Did you kind of know that though before you got there to that log, that like this girl?
Well,
she's special.
Yeah, I did know that. In fact, the introduction to my new book is, or the the first poem in it it talks about, it was written in 1980, and it talks about how we got together in some ways.
Do you write poems and then kind of hold on to them and go back to them a while before you're ready to publish them?
I do. Sometimes it's not that long. A lot of the ones that Cyril has published have been written fairly recently. A couple of them haven't.
Yeah.
But it's quite frequent for that. And what's been happening is, as much as I write new poems, I've been going through old files and papers and things and finding ones that turn out to be better than I thought they were, or with a little work become better than I thought they were. So probably this book, I guess I can hold it over here.
Yeah, you can. Still points.
Still points.
Yeah. Still points. Is this the one that's with Basilian, with Cyril Jenkins?
Basilian Media and Publishing. Yeah, it's Cyril's.
Yeah. Well, here, if you put it right in front of your face, we know for sure the audience will see it, because sometimes you can't tell, but they're cropping us on YouTube. Okay. But that still points. Okay, Matthew, Robert, look at that. I love that. We were talking about this before the show, but it's such a cool cover, because for those of you on YouTube, you can see you have this beautiful beeswax candle, which becomes a pen, but the shadow it casts is the cross. And it's just, it's a beautiful image. It's really neat. And it sort of takes a minute to catch it, because at first you don't see it all right away. But
they came up with that. I did not.
It's a good one. I like it. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. That's beautiful. How did you get acquainted with Cyril? Did you just send him some poems to publish, or did you meet him somehow?
I have never met him in person. Okay. But and actually, I'm not even sure how I originally found out about this. It's this magazine, Rule of Faith.
Rule of Faith, yeah.
He's published. This isn't the latest issue, I don't think, but he's published several of my poems. I think 11 altogether over the last few issues, and this is available on Amazon as well as the book. And I might as well show all the other two books.
Show them all.
These two were published by Whitf and Stock earlier. Mm-hmm. This one, called Again with the Light.
That's a great title. I like that, Again with the Light.
Yeah, I came up with that while I was still at my Master's of Fine Arts at Ashland University. And that was I graduated from that in 2016.
Okay.
And
so you went back later and got a master's.
So this was their picture too, the publisher's picture, and I think it really reflects the nature material that's in here, as well as kind of the spiritual material that's in here.
That's neat.
And, this has poems written in Paris, France, because one of my residencies was actually in Paris, France.
Nice.
Angie Estes, if anybody's heard of her, she's won a lot of poetry prizes, which I've not won a lot of poetry prizes, but I'm starting to have followers and readers and things now, which is exciting because it's taken many, many years.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm sure it's hard to kind of catch on as a poet, right? There's not a big poet circuit. Yeah. But what's the other book?
They're not rock stars.
Right.
This one is, although I was influenced by those. In fact, there was a band called Procol Harum, and they had a person who did nothing but write their lyrics. They wrote a famous song called Whiter Shade of Pale. And
yes.
And they had this person who did nothing but write poetry for them. And I thought, I'd like to just write poetry for a rock group. I never did.
Great job. I don't know how you get that job, but that's a great job. Just be the lyricist.
I don't know how that came about. I've actually never, I've read about them, but I've never.
That's pretty cool, actually. And so this one this is not your poetry. This is a collection of Carter Lee Aldridge's poetry.
That's right. It has a few of my poems in it that we shared in some way or another. But mostly this is his poetry. This is everything, all the poetry that I have of his, and I did not get all of it, which I feel he died in 1990, and I feel sad that there were some things that he wrote in his letters to me that he had distributed around. He'd moved down to Atlanta, Georgia from Michigan. And there were some things that there's no way that I can find them now. But everything I had...
I was just going to say, that's called Remember the Brotherhood.
Remember the Brotherhood is Carter's phrase from one of the last letters he wrote to me.
Oh, that's cool.
And
that's neat.
I just thought that was so cool.
I love that. So you edited this volume and put it together and collected all the poetry you could track down. That's wonderful.
All the poetry that I have. And I also took our letters, mostly his letters, because he was more poetic in his letters than I was. And so I took his letters and turned them into found poetry, like prose poems that you make by cutting out certain parts that don't need to be in it until you have a poem. And that's a technique that's actually pretty recognized. I learned about it in college and so on.
Yeah,
but that's the technique I used for the letters that are in this book. And then this is, Whippenstock doesn't usually use the author's artwork, but this is actually one of Carter's block prints. He sent me maybe 10 or 12 block prints.
Well, it's really neat. I mean, he was a good artist, so I can see why they made an exception and let you put his art on the cover. It's really...
I would like to sometime publish all of his artwork
block
too.
Prints. That would be neat. That's really neat. And so how did you know him? How did you know Carter Lee Eldridge?
Well, I met him in college, but he lived in Midland in easy walking distance, and across the street from his house was a woods that we would walk in and things like that. And we'd sit around and listen to music. We listened to Eric Satie, who composed I like very short pieces. Most of my poems will fit on one page, or if they don't, they're in sections that each one fits on one page. Not entirely that way, but most of the time that way. And I like short, sweet little pieces of art, I guess. Maybe I don't have the desire to spend a long time. I did read The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, and I really enjoyed that. And
so you can appreciate really long, complicated art.
I can appreciate it, but I don't often have time for it, and I end up getting distracted to other things. But short pieces, I like to get books that have either short poems or short vignettes and things like that in them.
That's neat. That's really neat, and it's wonderful that you were able to put together all of his things after his passing and to have that published. That's wonderful.
I thought it was the least thing I could do as a friend. I mean, I really did.
Yeah, that's really neat. That's very neat. All right, so Kay, as a child, had this thought about, why was there no Reformation in the Eastern Church? Is that how you ended up in the Orthodox Church? How did you guys ever find your way over?
It wasn't just from that. It was also from like my tour of the Orthodox Church in that class that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And those things. But we at one point, after we had children, we needed to educate them, and we didn't want to send them to public school. But there was a Lutheran church in school within a few blocks of us. And so for 10 years, we were Lutherans. And in that way, we were introduced to liturgical worship. And some of the teachers at the school actually shared books with us. One of them was by Frankie Schaeffer. Francis Schaeffer had been an influential writer for me when I was in college. He was a Protestant philosopher and theologian kind of person. And so his son, Frankie, later became Greek Orthodox. And then I'm not sure if he still is even or not, but I don't know either way. But this book was very, I have to say, it was strident in its tone. But the arguments in it were just, for Kay and I, we read it together, and it was suggested by one of the teachers in the Lutheran school.
Wow. There you go.
We read this book together, and there were other books that we read, and we just came to the conclusion that the Orthodox faith is right, and the things that we've been involved in were not right for us anymore.
Wow.
It wasn't that they didn't contribute anything to our faith, but the Orthodox Church just was clearly going to be home, and so we did things like go to the Greek festival, meet the priest, and things like that, and we didn't have a long catechumen. We just joined the church and got chrismated. We were some of the first. We were the first couple ever to join the Greek Orthodox Church, that particular Greek Orthodox Church.
To just sort of show up at the door.
Well, to show up at the door and not have, not because we were married to somebody who was Greek Orthodox or any of that kind of thing.
Yeah, back then that was the number one. And that was how you brought people into the church, was you married them and they converted.
Yeah, many people didn't understand why we as a couple didn't go to American churches, but we went to the Greek Orthodox Church. And
I feel like when converts first showed up, some of the Orthodox were really confused because when they first got here, America was really hostile to them. And so all of a sudden we started showing up, knocking on the doors, and they weren't sure what to do.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I think so. But so you guys kind of decided before you were going to the church that this was the right thing for you. Was it hard then to kind of integrate into the worship and everything? Because it's not, I don't know, it's just, there's a way that sometimes we have an idea that we want to be Orthodox, but then you get there and it's like, well, what does Orthodoxy really look like? And how do you deal with all the unfamiliarity of it? And probably a lot of it being in Greek. And how did you guys
A lot of it was in Greek.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing was that they had a hymn book that had the Greek on one page and a transliteration of the Greek and also the original Greek. So it was pretty easy to follow the services. And Kay kind of has become choir director any place we've gone. And she became choir director there too. And she learned she learned more Greek than I did. I don't remember much of what I did learn, but at the time when we were there, I picked up things but to integrate into the church, there were people who were friendly to us and became our sponsors. Actually, the guy who became my sponsor into the church was my dad's age and worked with my dad at Dow Corning Corporation in Midland. And,
wow.
And so later on, I got to know him, and he didn't really want to be my sponsor because I was only like in my 30s then. And or about 40, and but what I said to him was, if I'd been a baby, you would have been in your 30s then. So I think there's nothing really wrong with this. No, and he ended up agreeing to do it, and he's gone now. But
no, that's it is funny because when you're dealing with children, you think you want somebody parent aged. And then with adults, it's like, oh, no, you need a buddy or a friend. It's like, you could still use a parent. It's actually kind of nice.
Yeah, it ended up being somebody my dad's age, roughly.
That's fantastic. So, well, and someone who knew your dad. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But so I want to hear some of your poetry before we finish. And we've got about 10 more minutes. So I want to hear...
Don't want to run out of time here, so...
Well, and it's also, I know you have a lot of poetry, a lot of different poetry, but so just whatever speaks to you at the moment.
I printed out a stack that is flexible so I can read 2 or 3 of them or more if necessary. This one was published in Rule of Faith, and it was written in, it actually says it here, it was written in 2023, so it's a recent poem. And it's called He's Remained With Us in the Bread. And it goes, and is this not indeed a miracle? The 2 disciples, Luke and Cleopas, going down the road and feeling bad, and Jesus joining them. That makes me glad, as when they said, it's time for us to go into the temple of the Lord to hear what he will tell, by opening his word and singing psalms and hearing his prophets. That is what happened as we walked along, with hearts that burned with love as he spoke on. We didn't know him, didn't recognize until we saw him take the bread, bless it, and break the bread. And that opened our eyes. And then he was gone. but no, he isn't gone.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Did that come through all right?
Yes, absolutely. That's beautiful. That's really neat. That's one of my favorite passages in Scripture. Luke and
It's one of
Cleopas
mine
walking.
too. It's Luke and Cleopas walking.
There's so much to think about there, right?
The third line in that poem, going down the road and feeling bad, actually comes from a blues song, traditional blues song. So it's
it does sound bluesy, right?
You know, my rock and roll background is going to make itself felt.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden it's turning into a blues song for me. You know, walking down the road and feeling bad. Da, 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 da. But it's just such an interesting and beautiful story, right? The idea that they didn't recognize him, but then did recognize him, and the way that, you know, we don't see him, but then in communion, there we are, we have him. Thank God. That's beautiful. Okay, let's hear another one.
Just today, our priest in his sermon said the reason people didn't recognize Christ after his resurrection was because they weren't expecting him. They, they thought he was dead, so they weren't expecting to see Christ. And they weren't. And the whole sermon was about paying attention. The Greek word nipsis, for instance.
Right.
He didn't use that word, but paying attention. And it was not because Jesus was doing parlor tricks on them, but it was because they weren't paying attention.
Right.
And
that's beautiful.
Until that came to be their.
And the fathers and the saints talk so much about that, right? Like just really being aware of what's happening around us and what we're doing and what we're thinking and you know, and where he is, watching for him always.
Yes.
That's neat.
That's
all right, I want to hear another one.
Okay. This one is called Communion Prayer. And I'm going to read the poem and then I'll read this was also published in Rule of Faith in 2024. It's called Waver. And I found out just in my online reading that waver, besides everything we know that it means, it also refers to a sapling left standing in a fallen wood. Like when they clear cut an area for lumber, you'll see these little, and I've seen this before many times, these little skinny trees that had to grow up in the shade and find the light the best they could. They were left there because they were too small to use for lumber. But now they're left without protection and these things. So I'll just go from there and read the poem, and then the thing I published after that, the short paragraph. So this is called Waver, and I use the dictionary definition: a sapling left standing in a fallen wood. As I pass on the road, the small rolling hills, wavers wave in the gusts, from feathery, unfiddling ferns and huckleberry shrubs, still brown, scarce brightened birches, and smooth-skinned seedling poplars, among crowds of stumps, splintery, shelved with fungus. Uncannily skinny, lanky and bendy, maple and hickory and oak now must stick it out, blinking and getting their balance, without shelter, silence, or muted light. Like the wisdom and peace and power of God, who waits for my repentance, these wave with patient groans for my return. This poem came out of actually finding a recognized term for the spindly, swaying saplings one can usually see in a clear-cut woodland. They remind me of the experience of this chaotic world, where I seek the shelter of Mary's uncut mountain forest, like the prophet Habakkuk. So
that's beautiful. Oh my goodness. That's really beautiful.
That's one that he picked that out of my manuscript to publish in the magazine. I didn't even submit that one to the magazine.
Yeah, I bet he did. It's really striking. It's really a beautiful way of looking at, I don't know, just these lovely little trees that get left behind, you know, what that experience is and how it looks like our experience. That's beautiful.
And so sometimes they struggle to survive because they're used to growing in shade. A lot of times it's sugar maples or other trees that can grow in shade. And then they're out in the sunlight. So
Right, what a shock. What a shock to be in the middle of this huge towering forest and then suddenly just alone on a planet. And trees are not made, they can't move, right? So like that kind of change is very unexpected for a tree. That's really neat.
Yeah. I've learned a lot about trees and how they communicate with each other through their roots and through fungus and so on, how they'll actually kind of guard each other from insect attacks to a certain extent and things
Isn't
like
that crazy? When I heard that, maybe 5 years ago, I was just completely blown away that they can like send out kind of a warning message, right, through the root network and warn the other trees to sort of like stop absorbing from, what is it that they do to protect themselves from? I'm trying to think, is it just like to sort of close off a little bit?
They'll make chemicals that actually repel or else they actually kill certain insects.
That's cool.
And things like
so
that.
Neat.
So it's pretty amazing what they can do. Trees do get a lot of diseases and pests. I think the latest pest we had that was really bad was the ash borer. And it killed a lot of ash trees, but they're making a comeback now and new ones are growing because the trees attracted birds and the birds ate the larvae. So there aren't as many larvae.
Look at that. Look how God builds in a system. Makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah. Well, and you can see where C.S. Lewis comes to the trees, right? I'm sorry, it's Tolkien. Apparently he had read, in Macbeth where it said the forest rises up, and he was always disappointed in Macbeth that the forest didn't really rise up. So the Ents come and they rise up, and it's like, I think he would have loved knowing that they can communicate. Isn't that cool?
I know about the Ents, but I didn't realize that that's where that came from.
Yeah, that was as a young man, he was really annoyed about it.
Well, I can understand that.
Yeah. Oh, I feel that. I was annoyed too. I was like, look, the forest is supposed to rise up. Okay, we have just 2 minutes, but I know your poetry is short.
Okay.
So.
I'm going to read just one more. And this goes back to the rock and roll again. This is called A Blues for Adam. And it's based on an actual song, or an Orthodox hymn, which I don't have the reference to that here, but this is in the style of 12-bar blues and could be sung to pretty much any 12-bar blues song that you might get from Cream or Hendrix or somebody.
Wow.
It goes, Adam in front of the gates of Eden, crying out to God. Adam in front of the gates of Eden, sad in his nakedness, crying out his tears. Oh, woe is me, for I am woe. Oh, beautiful paradise, my home, where do you hide? Oh, beautiful paradise, my home, where do you hide? Been lied to by the serpent, now I live outside. Outside in the world, driven far away. Outside in the world, driven far away. How will I ever get back to the place where I can stay? My open mind, it's been like a hole in my head. My open mind, it's made a hole in my heart. Naked, confused, now I need a new start. O paradise, no longer will I enjoy your delights. Oh, woe is me, my beautiful paradise. He lifted me from the dust, now back to dust I'll die. Compassionate Lord, O Lord, have mercy on me. Lord, I have fallen. Lord, Lord, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, lover of man, have mercy on me. O paradise where the sycamore grows high. O paradise, land where the sycamore grows high. Perhaps from your branches I'll see the Lord by and by. Oh, I do have the name here. It's Vladimir Morozin, Morosan. That's where the tune that's
where the hymn originated.
Where the words were adapted from.
Right. That's beautiful.
To a blues song.
I love that. That's so haunting. That's really neat. Well, my goodness. Thank you so much. This is Matthew Robb Brown.
Reading it again.
Right? Yes. It's really moving. It's really beautiful. But just to remind our audience, Matthew Robb Brown, you can find you're probably on Amazon, right? If they search your name.
Right. All these books that I've mentioned are on Amazon, and so is Rule of Faith Journal. You can look under that too.
Yep. Oh, wonderful. Well, and thank you so much for being with us. This has been truly a joy to get to know you, Matthew.
Well, it's been a joy to get to know you and to do this show. I really do enjoy it. Could talk about a lot more, but
Right? That's always that people go, how can we fill an hour? I'm like, we could fill 3 hours, but
I know.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Matthew. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And we'll see you next week with another Everyday Orthodox Christian. Good night.
All right. Good night.